Hello, I'm Ronnie Eldridge. Welcome to Eldridge and Company. In the city election 2 years ago, voters of the 3rd Council District in Manhattan elected Corey Johnson to represent them. His district includes the neighborhoods of Hell's Kitchen, Chelsea, the West Village, parts of the Flatiron, Soho, and the Upper West Side. I'm also pleased to say he's my council member, and he's my guest today. That's a great district you have.
Yes, it's a big district.
Yeah, and it goes through it's known as the West Side.
Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite things to say is that the district runs from Canal Street to 63rd Street on the West Side. So the neighborhoods you listed, West Soho, Hudson Square, Greenwich Village, the West Village, Chelsea, Flatiron, Hell's Kitchen, a little bit of the Upper West Side, Columbus Circle, Times Square, the Theater District, the Garment District, the High Line, the Hudson River Park, Penn Station, Madison Square Garden, the new Whitney Museum. I mean, the other council members don't like when I say this, but it's the best district.
It has to be.
Yes.
It's interesting with Hudson Yards, you mentioned that. That's a whole new city, basically, coming there. How will that affect, do you think? I was going to say, when I represented the Upper West Side, and when I was a kid, it was just part of the West Side. Everybody said, "Oh, you're from the West Side. What do you expect? She's so liberal, she's from the West Side." And that was nationally, state, and local, even in the council. She's from the West Side, don't listen to her. But do you think Hudson Yards is going to change the whole feeling and the demographics of the district?
Yeah, I do. Hudson Yards, I joke, is when it's fully built, and I think most folks who live in the surrounding neighborhoods don't even fully comprehend what's coming. I joke that it's going to look like Abu Dhabi on the Hudson. You're going to have, I think it's 17 million square feet of new development on the eastern and western rail yards where the trains come into Penn Station. And the first portion is going to be the eastern rail yards, nearly all commercial space. And the western rail yards is going to be almost all residential space. And you're going to have these gleaming, huge towers that I think will revitalize the area over there that was neglected for far too long. But it's going to change things. You're going to have a massive amount of new residents, of commercial space, of retail space. It's why the new 7 train extension at Hudson Yards was created. The High Line swoops around Hudson Yards. The Javits Center is just to the west of it. The Hudson River Park is being built out. So that entire area is transformative, and as we've seen in the news the last couple of days, the Gateway Tunnel, which is a tunnel that's needed for Amtrak to get more trains into New York City, comes under Hudson Yards. So that whole area is not just transformative for the west side of Manhattan, it's actually transformative for the entire city and the entire region.
Is it mostly high market rate housing?
It is. On the eastern rail yards, it's going to be mostly office space. And on the western rail yards, closer to the river, it's going to be a lot of market housing. But the deal that was created and crafted by the community board back in 2005, when this area was rezoned with the Bloomberg administration after his proposed West Side Stadium for the Jets had failed.
This is what's replacing it.
This is what replacing it. There was a huge commitment for a lot of off-site affordable housing in the surrounding neighborhood, and that affordable housing is now going through development in earnest, and I'm working with the local community board. And so we have a bunch of buildings together going up that are not 80-20 buildings, 80 market, 20% affordable, 100% affordable buildings are going up.
Very high.
Yes, and that came out of the Hudson
Rentals
Yards
or
deal.
condos?
Rentals.
That's interesting.
Yes.
And large apartments or mostly small?
It's a mix of studios, 1 bedrooms, and 2 bedrooms. And we always ask for more 2 bedrooms than 1 bedrooms and studios to try to be able to support families.
Right. So you'll have a lot of single people in smaller apartments.
That's right.
And what's going to happen to the merchants on 9th Avenue? Are they worried, and are you working with them?
Yeah, we have a new bid that was created, Business Improvement District, that was created out of the Hudson Yards rezoning, and that bid has been working with local merchants along 9th Avenue on all sorts of things, sanitation issues, beautification. I mean, I think one of the real crises that we're seeing not just in my district, but all over the city, though I think my district is sort of the epicenter of it, is the gigantic loss of small businesses.
Oh, definitely.
Mom and pop
Yeah.
stores, empty storefronts,
Yeah.
the locksmith is gone, the shoe store is gone, the dry cleaner is gone, and what do we have in place? We have banks, Dwayne Reed's, and nail salons. Those are the replacements, and those aren't good for local communities. And I have similar concerns about what's going to happen in the Hudson Yards area because it's already happening, and it may accelerate.
They're going to be all boutiques and expensive housing.
Like Bleecker Street is now.
Yeah, yeah. It's just one designer after
That's
another.
right, yeah.
Right. So it's all part of the change, the flow, and everything of neighborhoods, right?
Yeah.
It's the displacement. It's not very much displacement because it was over the yards.
Yeah, there's
Tenant
not
displacement.
No, but I think one of the fears is that the more luxury housing that you bring online in a neighborhood where they're getting $5,000 for a one-bedroom apartment, that there are concerns that what does that do to the surrounding rents in that neighborhood? They likely could go up similarly. So I think one of the things that the mayor has talked about and the council has been looking at is we can't build our way out of this housing crisis. It really is about preservation. How do we preserve the existing affordable units that we have in a meaningful and long-lasting, permanent way?
Is there a tax abatement in this project? I guess because of the off-site housing, right?
They received, it was a very complicated scheme, the funding and financing. There were bonds issued to be able to build this project, both related to the extension of the 7 train for the MTA, and there was a new public authority created called the Hudson Yards Development Corporation. And the financing is very complicated, but they were able to get a tax abatement to try to encourage the development there. This project, Hudson Yards, is the largest development project in the United States of America right now. And it's been going on since 2005, and it looks like it will be fully complete, both the eastern and western rail yards, by the kind of early 2020s.
Is it all done by Related?
It's all done by Related.
That's one developer.
One developer.
Boy, that's an incredible record he has there, right?
And initially, when the rezoning happened and the MTA, this was MTA-owned land, was bidding out the property, Related didn't win the bid. The bid was won by Tishman Speyer.
Oh.
And Tishman Speyer said a few months in, we actually can't do the plan. And Related immediately stepped up, and the down payment that Related had to put down just to start the project was $1 billion just to actually get their foot in the door. And so this is going to be a massive, massive development.
It's interesting also, but I hope there aren't any condominiums around it because the tax rates increase as the rentals, in the immediate vicinity. But anyway, let's not talk about that. I've had as guests different members of the council. It's such a new council and so much more advanced than when I was a member. So I'd like people to know what council members are, what made them do it. Your background, were you always a political interested person?
Well, I guess since I was like 18, I don't hold it against me. I'm not a native New Yorker. I grew up about 25 miles north of Boston in a little tiny town. My dad was a Pepsi truck driver, a Teamster. My mom was my lunch lady at school. I grew up in public housing. And when I was in high school, I was a really good athlete. And my junior year, I was elected captain of my high school football team. And at the end of my junior year, I came out of the closet in my school. This was in 1999. It was about 6 months after Matthew Shepard had been murdered in Wyoming, which the nation had kind of looked on. And I came out long.
Is that what pushed you into it?
Yeah, long before marriage equality had existed anywhere. Times were different, and I was very fortunate and lucky that I had a loving family, and things worked out at my school with my football team and with my classmates. And I spent a year, my senior year, traveling Massachusetts, speaking about my story. And that's what got me involved in activism. That's what got me involved in
interesting.
politics. I moved to New York when I was 19 years old, and I immediately got involved in local democratic politics. And in 2005, after living here for 4 years, I was appointed to my local community board, Community Board 4. I was the youngest community board member at the time, and I served on the board for 8.5 years. And the last 2.5 years, I was elected chair of the board. I think I was the youngest community board chair in New York City. And you know this, but your viewers should know that 8.5 years on a community board, most
It's a lot of stamina.
that's a
all I
lot.
can say.
It's not sexy being on a community board. It's a lot of local
Right.
hard work and issues that matter to local neighborhoods.
Right. It is interesting. And then you ran for the council.
And then I ran for the council in
Yeah.
2013.
So what is it that interests you about a community? I mean, what drives you? Do you pick up issues like gay rights? Are there other issues like that?
Yeah.
What else touches your soul?
Well, I mean, it sounds maybe hokey and corny, but I got
Question is a little hokey.
involved. I got involved. I got involved in politics and the political process, and then I ran for office myself to try to really help people and make a difference, especially folks that may not have the loudest voice in government. And so I've tried to do that in my 2 years in the council, and I'm proud to say that in the last 23 months of being in the council, I've passed more bills than any other council member. I've passed 14 bills into law, and most of those bills have been focused on helping communities and populations that are disadvantaged and marginalized. And that's really why I got involved
When
in
did you
government.
realize you were gay? I mean, what's interesting is it's people, you have this affinity, empathy for people who are not as privileged as other people, right? That's just instinctive. So that's it. I think that provides a very solid background and platform for elected officials.
Yeah.
And it's missing in a lot of them.
Well, it's funny. My family, my mom is one of 10 kids, a big Irish Catholic family. I have over 50 cousins. And my grandfather, who was the patriarch of the family, went to Mass every single day, a big Irish Catholic. Above his bed was a picture of JFK and the Pope. And when I came out to him when I was 16 years old, I was scared to death to tell him I was gay. Scared to death. And my mom dropped me off, and I walked in, and he said, "Sit down, I'm gonna make you dinner." And he looked at me and he said, "What's the matter?" He knew I had to tell him something. And so I said, "Grandpa, I'm afraid to tell you something." And he said, "What? Tell me." And I said, "I told Mom and Dad I'm gay." He goes, "Oh my God, you scared me. I thought you were gonna tell me you were a Republican."
Oh, that's a wonderful story.
He says, "You can be gay, you just can never vote for a Republican or be a Republican, and you're good in my book." So my family, my
Yeah,
mom
that's
is a
wonderful.
homeless services provider. She helps run a homeless shelter in Massachusetts. And my family are kind of tried and true blue collar Irish Catholic Democrats. And I'm from a working class background, and I realized I was gay when I was 12 years old. And so that is what really lit the
So
flame
that
and
empathy
fire in
really
me.
drives you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're the chair of the health committee.
That's right.
So, I mean, where were you when we had this Ebola crisis? Did people consult you about what they did?
Yeah, the city was in touch. Dr. Mary Bassett, I think, is
She's
a
very
really
impressive,
yes,
isn't she?
she's a really exemplary health commissioner, really qualified person. She's just not had to deal with Ebola. This past summer, she had to deal with Legionnaires as well. And so these have been high-profile public health crises that we've seen throughout New York City, which has scared a lot of people. So I'm really grateful and glad I get to chair the health committee. I have been HIV positive for 12 years, and someone who, before I was elected to the council, had to navigate the health system, having health insurance, not having health insurance, being able to afford COBRA, not being able to afford COBRA, being able to afford my medicine, not being able to afford my medicine. And so that personal experience has really guided my work on trying to advocate so that all New Yorkers have affordable, quality, culturally competent health care. I believe health care is a civil right and should be a universal right.
Is the health the health department is quite an outstanding department, right?
Our health department is the best health department in the United States of
in the
America.
country.
But I'll tell you that the previous administration had really cut the health department to the bone. I mean, the health department was cut over 12 years, hundreds of millions of dollars. Last week, December 1st.
It's so interesting because Bloomberg is so interested in
public health.
Right.
Yes.
Right, yeah.
And last week was World AIDS Day. And the city council and the administration, the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, announced $30 million in new funding towards combating HIV and AIDS, both on the prevention side and supporting those who are living with HIV and AIDS. One of my predecessors who served in this seat in the 1990s, who you know, who went on to the state senate, Tom Duane, was open about his HIV status, was openly gay as well. He helped create something called, it was then called the Division of AIDS Services, and it morphed into HASA, the HIV and AIDS Service Administration. And I have a bill, and the mayor announced and the governor announced last week that we're going to be able to expand HASA to cover about 7,000 additional New Yorkers who are living with HIV and AIDS, which is very exciting. It's something that Tom Duane talked about in the 90s, and 20 years later, I'm able to help pick up the torch of where he left off.
Interesting. Tell me, let's talk about maternity and child. We still have a very high infant mortality rate.
We do.
Why?
Well, what we see across New York City, which is not surprising, if you go below 96th Street on the east side of Manhattan, the life expectancy is about 10 years higher than if you go above 96th Street. So what's more determinative these days of someone's health and their life expectancy is their zip code, not their genetic code. And so many of these endemic health problems like infant mortality, like HIV and AIDS, really are diseases of poverty. And people not having access to the care that they need. And that is why it's so important for us to focus on populations that have historically seen massive health disparities in their communities. There are plenty of neighborhoods across New York City, Upper Manhattan, the South Bronx, Southeast Queens, Central Brooklyn, the North Shore of Staten Island, that are what are called health deserts, where you don't have any primary care. You don't have any pediatric care. You don't have any preventative services. There simply aren't the services in the neighborhood. So if you have to bring services to people. You have to be in their neighborhoods. And that's part of what I'm focused on. It's part of what the council's focused on. It's part of what Commissioner Bassett and the mayor have talked about. And I believe we have a lot of work to do.
Sending teams in and establishing some neighborhood clinics? Or
Yes, that's one of the things, but also...
Is there federal funding for that?
The city has come up with, there's federal funding, but also EDC, the Economic Development Corporation, has invested funds in working with the Health and Hospitals Corporation, our city public hospital system, on setting up these clinics, getting federally qualified health centers in some of these neighborhoods, getting clinics, bringing in primary care physicians and specialty services. And so that's what we need to do.
People are enrolled in Medicaid?
People are enrolled in Medicaid, though.
Do we have a campaign to keep getting them enrolled? I guess we do.
Yeah, but that's one of the obstacles, actually, is that with Obamacare, which I'm a big supporter of, the healthcare system across the United States is transforming so quickly that
people can't keep up.
they don't. Most New Yorkers are busy, have lives, have kids, have jobs, and they can't entirely understand what's happening.
Yeah.
And so we have to, there are many, many New Yorkers that qualified for Medicaid, Medicare, the health exchanges through Obamacare, who don't even know that they qualify. And so part of it is going to them, signing them up, getting them covered, ensuring that they know about what their health benefits are and what they qualify for.
Do community boards and local neighborhood organizations help?
This work cannot be done without community-based organizations. There are
It's the heart of it.
Yeah, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of local CBOs that deal with special populations. So, in parts of Queens, you really want to go to the local CBO that works with the Bengali community. in Central Brooklyn or South Brooklyn, you want to go to some of these Caribbean organizations that work with that community. Those are the type of groups that the city has to partner with and help build capacity in to actually provide these services.
And even the health system generally is changing every day. I mean,
every day.
There, all of a sudden there's an NYU practice on 52nd Street or whatever in the West Side, or now Mount Sinai is. Roosevelt Hospital is now Mount Sinai Hospital.
Yes.
St. Vincent's is gone.
St. Vincent's is gone.
But all the hospitals have different locations through. People, I don't know how people understand that.
I think people are angry. I live 3 blocks from the former St. Vincent's
Well,
site.
that was a major loss.
161-year-old institution lost. Now there's no hospital in the Lower West Side of Manhattan in between the Battery and what was Roosevelt, but just changed to Mount Sinai West on 59th Street. And so you've seen these losses across the city. In the last decade, 13 hospitals have closed in New York City. And what has happened in its place? There have not been adequate services to replace the loss of hospitals. Now the system's changing. What's happening now is they're trying to prevent hospitalizations, which makes sense, and get people preventative care, primary care, before they actually have to end up in the hospital. But that doesn't take into account people have heart attacks, people have strokes, people have major accidents. And there should be a hospital in their area to take care of them when that happens.
The emergency services will take you, I guess, to the nearest hospital, but it can be a long thing.
Good luck getting across town in gridlock traffic.
Terrible. The traffic is terrible.
Yeah.
What other committees are you on?
I'm on, let's make sure I remember this. I chair the health committee. I'm on the contracts committee, which I know you chaired. I'm on the general welfare committee, which deals with homelessness, HRA, and ACS. I'm on the waterfronts committee, the mental health committee, and the finance committee. I'm on 6 committees.
That's a pretty full calendar schedule.
It's a full calendar,
It's a lot of work. So Times Square, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
I guess now that it's wintertime, or we think it's wintertime, the problem won't be as great. Was it ever settled as to what was going to happen there?
Well, I just want to say, I was not offended by topless women.
Yeah, neither was I.
I don't think that topless women were the problem.
We get so puritanical.
Yes.
This is it's just amazing, isn't it?
I was not offended by the topless women, and they weren't the issue. I think the real issue is that Times Square has become a victim of its own success. It has become a major tourist destination. I think the average New Yorker who lives here tries to avoid Times Square.
Absolutely.
Unless they're going to a Broadway show or unless they work in the Times Square area and have to go there for work. And what has happened is, with this very popular location, when the previous administration put in these pedestrian plazas, which impeded traffic flow throughout the neighborhood, but I think made it safer for pedestrians throughout Times Square, you've seen these things crop up, like CD sellers, like double-deck bus sellers, like these costume characters, like these topless women. Anyone wants to come and make a good buck. And there wasn't a regulatory framework set up that really looked towards the First Amendment to respect those rights of free speech to actually deal with this issue. So the administration put together what was called the Times Square Task Force of elected officials, city agencies, Broadway theater owners, the community board, other groups to come together and make recommendations. The recommendations, I think, were good recommendations, and the administration is trying to now put those into effect. Some of them can be done administratively. Some of them have to be done via legislation from the council, and I'm working with my colleague, Councilmember Johnson. He and I share Times Square on those solutions.
The Lindsay administration used to have a lot of street closings and a lot of street theater and projects on it. So here we created this very large place to go and sit for tourists, but there was nothing for them to do. I mean, you can look at the signs, but how long are you going to look at the signs, right?
I hear this all the time. I mean, let's give the example of bike lanes. So bike lanes are put in to make it safer for cyclists. Well, what's not done simultaneously is to ensure that cyclists aren't riding the wrong way, running red lights, running stop signs, going on sidewalks. And I hear all the time from constituents, people with young children and especially seniors,
older people,
who get hit, come close to getting hit, And so it really comes down to enforcement. And the NYPD has, understandably,
A lot
they'll
of other
say,
things to do.
much bigger issues to deal with than sitting on corners and writing tickets for cyclists
But it
blowing
really
through lights.
comes down to planning.
That's right.
I mean, we could have lovely bicycle lanes around the island, but we don't really need them midtown, I don't think. I don't know.
I think we have to be smart about it. And what you said about Times Square, those pedestrian plazas, they were put in, but they weren't put in with any real programming behind them. But I think the bigger issue on all of this, on bike lanes, on Times Square, on what happens with our parks, it really comes down to having a holistic, substantive, and thoughtful urban planning and city planning vision
The
for our
last citywide
neighborhoods.
planning was done under the Lindsay administration.
In the
That was
60s.
the last master plan
That's
for the
right.
city. It's time, I think, that we did it.
Yes.
Especially, but it's, you know, it's also very difficult because we've got such a changing city all the time. The housing and the gentrification of the neighborhoods. I mean, you could look at some neighborhoods and say, my God, 10 years ago it wasn't anything like this. Look at you.
It's
You're going
interesting.
to have a whole nother city.
I don't know if this was your experience when you were in the council, but what I find by and large when I hear from my constituents is most constituents don't ask me about legislation. They don't ask me about the budget. They don't ask me about oversight on city agencies, and they don't typically ask about land use, the four major things that the council does. They typically ask about their local park, their local school, their local small business, traffic on their block, trash overflowing from their trash cans, hyper local concerns. And New Yorkers have real ownership and are deeply proprietary over their local block and their local neighborhood. We are a city of hundreds of neighborhoods. And I think that's what motivates most New Yorkers.
But, you know, there were overlying issues.
Yes.
And that's the other group that comes, the lobbyists. And nonprofit lobbyists, I think, well, lobbyists, if they're doing the right job, are very important because they're a source of a lot of education. You have to use your own intelligence and ethical standards to decide what you're going to do. But they're addressing citywide issues usually, right?
Yes.
And I don't want to leave people with the impression that you're not interested in these major issues. I mean, the city council has always that dual
That's right.
responsibility, which is so interesting.
That's why we pass legislation that
Yeah.
affects the whole city.
It's what makes it really the legislative part.
Yeah, and that's why I really value all the work I get to do in the health committee.
Yeah.
Which is not just about my district. Most of the time it's not about my district. It's about the entire city and places that have been underserved.
Yeah. So you're one of these new leaders of the council, one of these new energetic, exciting people, and the council is so much better with it. We've come to the end, Corey, so thank you very much.
Thank
and
you.
I hope we'll talk again.
I look forward to it. Thanks,
All right.
Ronnie.
Thank you. If there are any people you'd like to hear or topics you'd like us to explore, please let me know. You can write to me at CUNY TV, 365 Fifth Avenue, New York, New York, 10016. Or you can go to the website at cuny.tv and click on Contact Us. I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.